Woo!
So thanks for having me here. Some of you guys will know I was a co-founder of the society with Jake there and Dave, some of you might know. So it's always nice to be back. Now, why humour? Give you a bit of background into my kind of background. I studied politics and then I went on to do a master's in resistance, and we were really given absolutely free rein to do anything, and I, just for my interest, started getting into kind of psychedelics and mysticism, originally looking at it as like resistance to organised religion. And then, for some reason, I just had Bill Hicks in the back of my mind constantly cropping up, always somehow finding a place and everything. And eventually, because of all the stuff to do with mysticism and just having loved Bill Hicks since I was a teenager, I found myself doing a thesis completely on Bill Hicks, and really looking at comedy and mysticism in this same kind of vein. This front cover is from a book about crazy wisdom. I can't remember the name of the book, but I'll find out if anyone wants to know. That I'm going to touch on a bit later. But through my kind of research, I've tried to hone things down a bit more, really trying to look at humour. And something that I kind of realised recently, actually, at Breaking Convention this year, the Psychedelics conference, Greenwich Uni, I was speaking in a session with a guy called Bernard Kelly Patterson, and he was about to speak, and he just looks at me, and he goes, "Sex as well?" Yeah, what? And he's like, "Sex, you know, it's another taboo, like comedy, like humour in the psychedelic movement. It's like, so, you know, you need to get these taboo topics out there." I was like, maybe it is a bit of a taboo topic. Maybe humour is something that happens within the psychedelic experience, and it's kind of seen as something childlike, not very serious, something we shouldn't pay too much attention on. It's just like a story to tell about having a great time. But really, when it comes down to it, you know, the main focus of psychedelics has seemingly very rightly so been to do with the therapeutic application of all of these things, how they can help people, spiritual development, creative development, all of these different types of things which are now coming out of what people are calling the Renaissance, the psychedelic Renaissance. But I'm kind of putting it forward to everyone that humour is something we should all really take seriously. It's absolutely vital to what we are. So, shall I begin? Anyone know who this guy is with the nice hat?
Charlie Chaplin.
Charlie Chaplin. It is. Well done, Luke. It's Luke. Henri Bergson. So Henri Bergson was a French philosopher, and he wrote about humour. And he said, as I just mentioned, it is something which is innately human. It doesn't exist anywhere else other than the human mind. We can find things in nature humorous. We can look at animals and they remind us of our friends, as I'll be talking about later. And, you know, we can kind of see the joy in it, but nature itself isn't actually humorous. There's nothing about it. Bergson said that the reason why it's kind of intrinsic to humans is because it appeals to intellect. So he gives the example of people walking into a room where there's no music playing but everyone's dancing around, and it would look absolutely ridiculous. So humour kind of has this revealing aspect to it, which makes us think, kind of turns our brain on, makes us think, you know, that's not really right, something's going on here. And we have this reaction in a kind of situation that we're not really so sure about, and we laugh or we feel a bit kind of uncomfortable. Now, doing my research, I came across quite a few figures real points if anyone knows who any of these people are. This person here, some people might know. Anyone? It is, yeah, Diogenes. So, Diogenes was the founder of the kind of ancient Greek branch of Cynic philosophy. There's lots of different stories about him. Here he's got a barrel, and the reason why he's got a barrel is because he was living in his house, as all of the other people in ancient Greece did, and he was out walking around and saw a snail with a shell. And he thought, that's, seems like a better idea. Why have a house? I can have a thing, carry it around with me all the time, got my house there. Bit of a strange guy, did a lot of weird stuff, like, exposing himself to people in public. But here there's a famous story where, he's kind of been known over ancient Greece as this, crazy philosopher, cynic person, madman who lives in a barrel. He had a lot of dogs following him around all the time. And so Alexander the Great hears of him and travels all across Greece to find Diogenes. And Diogenes is just there, slumped up, with his stick, very casually. And Alexander the Great's there, and he says, famous philosopher Diogenes. It's like, I've travelled across Greece to hear all your wisdom. Like, what have you to say to me? It's like, you just move out a bit of the way, kind of blocking the sunlight. So, that to me is like the original kind of trolling of like, someone in power. And there's more kind of people and figures that lead us towards slightly more mystical states. So I got quite interested in a few figures in Zen Buddhism. So this happy chappy here is Zen Master Han Shaman, and he's always depicted laughing because there's stories of students coming along and really asking him about Zen Buddhism, and him just laughing like a little Yoda, and then walking away because they can't get any answers out of it. And he kind of was the basis for this idea of crazy wisdom, which I mentioned earlier. So it's the idea that you've gone so far down the rabbit hole, you've looked at all the different interpretations of what life means and reality means, and you've had this trip and that trip, and you've seen this jaguar with this godhead and everything, and you've gone, and it gets to the point where it's just like, does it really, mean anything? What are we actually getting to? And when you get to that point of you're like, well, what is it really? It's all just, you enter this state of crazy wisdom where, someone asks you what the nature of reality is, and you just laugh in their face. This is another Zen master, Ikkyu, who used to run around town with a skeleton on his back, just to put across the point of the mortality of life. Now, these two figures here, I really got quite interested in. This one in particular, anyone know who this character is? So, this guy is called Mullah Nasreddin. Now, there's lots of stories about him in Sufi Islam, and very similar to kind of Zen Buddhist stories, the whole idea of kind of shaking you out of your normal mindset. So the one I really like, he's standing outside his house and he's got a book and he's tearing pages out, tearing bits of paper up, scattering them around. His neighbour comes up to him, he's like, Mullah Nasreddin, what are you doing? He's like, well, I'm scattering the paper around to keep the tigers away. Like, there aren't any tigers. It's like, I see how well it works. And this is the idea that, really trying to second guess people, make people think, really putting people on their toes. And it's funny that he's sitting on a donkey riding backwards, and this drawing here is what's called a heyoka. Now, heyoka is a sacred clown, namely in the Lakota tribe. These characters would be a very central figure with a lot of ceremonies, different to the shaman. So the shaman would be leading and holding the space. Whereas these people, so riding on the horse backwards, again, it's this idea to shake people out of their normal mindset. They would be, face first in a puddle, screaming and splashing around because they were drowning, wearing clothes backwards, speaking backwards, doing all of these ridiculous things. And it was the idea that all of the community really need to read between the lines and see that things aren't necessarily what they seem, and that it's a very important part of their society. I kind of got to this point through resistance, and when I reached these kind of figures in particular, I was a bit stumped because I was like, well, is it reinforcing the status quo that everything's fine and dandy and we should all just kind of live under the control of the chieftains? Or is it actually kind of effectively telling people not to worry and everything's going to be all right and things might not necessarily be how they seem, but that's okay and that's an important part and there's a context and a structure for it. Now, I don't really think we have that structure so much in, I guess, modern secularised society. But, as I mentioned before, people like the great Bill Hicks, I had this quote at the beginning of my chapter, my dissertation. I was very kind of bold with a lot of stuff in my dissertation, but it was really just so much fun just to be able to kind of write whole pages of swear words and ridiculous nonsense. So, I don't know who knows of Bill Hicks. I'm not going to ramble about Bill Hicks because I already did a talk about that, but he's kind of seen as one of the main comedians that's really incorporated the psychedelic realm into his art. It certainly changed his art. It was certainly an incredible influence on his art. His mannerisms, how everything changed, the topics of discussion. Having said that, he only has about 2 hours of material that he kind of rehashes all the time, but it's absolutely brilliant. And so we're going to watch just a short clip. It's loud enough. Oh no, sorry. So yeah, he got very interested in drugs, particularly LSD, mushrooms, cannabis. This artwork here, does anyone know?
Alex Gray.
Alex Gray. So specifically, it's from the Tool album Utilised, and Bill Hicks was really good friends with the band. And they kind of both had an influence on each other around the time of the early 90s when there was a lot going on in the world, a lot of kind of tension as there still is today. And, okay, so this is the clip I wanted to show you. It's working. Bear with me one moment. It's a real shame. So I had the file on my computer because the file is not on this computer. It's not.
But I've always found religion to be fascinating. Ideas such as how people act on their beliefs. Pro-lifers murdering doctors. Pro-lifers murdering people. It's irony on the base level, but I like it. It's real basic irony, but still you can get a hoot. It's a hoot. It's a fucking hoot. I can really kill your ass. That's what fundamentalism breeds, though. No irony. You're saying they take the word literally, you know. Fundamentalists, yeah. Well, once again, I recommend a healthy dose of psilocybin mushrooms. 3 weeks ago, 2 of my friends and I went to a ranch in Fredericksburg, Texas, and took what Terence McKenna calls a heroic dose. 5 dried grams. Let me tell you, our third eye was squeegeed quite cleanly. Wow! And I'm glad they're against the law. You know what happened when I took them? I lay in the field of green grass for 4 hours, going, my God, I love everything. The heavens parted, God looked down and rained gifts of forgiveness onto my being, healing me on every level, psychically, physically, emotionally. And I realized our true nature is spirit, not body, that we are eternal beings, and God's love is unconditional. There's nothing we can ever do to change that. It is only our illusion that we are separate from God or that we are alone. In fact, the reality is we are one with God and He loves us. Now, if that isn't a hazard to this country, you see my point. How are we going to keep building nuclear weapons? You know what I mean? What's going to happen to the arms industry when we realize we're all one? It's going to fuck up the economy. The economy that's fake anyway. Which would be a real bummer, you know? You can see why the government's cracking down on the idea of experiencing unconditional love.
So, for Bill, I'm just going to quickly find my clip. So, for Bill, psychedelics really had this very spiritual potential to reveal a lot of things and kind of put people at peace, I guess. A very kind of loving message put across by him. But also this idea of kind of piercing through this perceived notion of things. And when I really got into looking at stand-up comedy, there was quite a few figures that I looked at, aside from Bill. This person here, most people know. So George Carlin. Most of you probably know he was an actor in Bill and Ted, and he was kind of doing the mainstream thing quite a lot, appearing in adverts. But because of his experiences in the 70s and 80s with drugs, he really kind of changed his style quite a lot, and we'll see a clip of him in a minute. Carlin was very much so trying to pierce through this kind of perceived bullshit. And then everyone here obviously knows Joe Rogan. Joe Rogan is, I wouldn't necessarily call him a psychedelic comedian. He's a comedian who is incredibly interested in psychedelics. He's certainly influenced his style. I don't know how much he necessarily talks about drugs. From what I've watched, apart from kind of talking about weed, he doesn't necessarily go into that material there, and it's more kind of reserved for his podcast and things like that. But he's certainly been one of the great advocates in America, really getting stuff into the mainstream. A lot of people see him as this go-between the kind of macho world of UFC and all the hippies. I think it's quite important to have someone like him around, even though I might not necessarily agree with half the stuff he says. I think it's important that people like him are bringing it to people's attention. This guy here, anyone know?
Doug Stanhope.
Yeah. So Doug Stanhope is possibly one of my favourite comedians, hands down, mind-bending, but it's too much of a crazy minefield. Doug Stanhope, I think, again, he doesn't necessarily talk about drugs that much, but he's certainly been influenced by his use of substances. He talks about it quite openly. He has this phrase, excess in moderation, which is the idea of, if you're really going to do something, if you're going to, take drugs, really go for it, As he says, don't eat a mushroom stem and see a few pretty lights, eat the whole bag and see God. And he also has a quote which I think is great, which is, boredom is a disease worse than cancer, and drugs cure it. So I'm going to quickly show you the George Carlin clip. I put this in a sort of 2-page quote of my whole dissertation. I think it's quite an interesting insight into someone who's maybe quite energetically really going for it, trying to pierce through kind of perceived dominance of like commercialism and capitalism, and this is what he calls the advertising lullaby.
The next thing is about advertising. And by the way, if you should have any cognitive dissonance about the fact that I do commercials for 10, 10, 220 and still attack advertising up here, well, you're just going to have to figure that shit out on your own, okay? This is called advertising lullaby. Keeping in mind, of course, that the whole purpose of advertising is to lull you to sleep. Quality, value, style, service, selection, convenience, economy, savings, performance, experience, hospitality, low rates, friendly service, name brands, easy terms, affordable prices, money-back guarantee, free installation. Free admission, free appraisal, free alterations, free delivery, free estimates, free home trial, and free parking. No cash, no problem, no kidding. No fuss, no must, no risk, no obligation, no red tape, no down payment, no entry fee, no hidden charges, no purchase necessary, no one will call on you, no payments of interest till September. Limited time only though, so act now, order today, send no money, offer good while supplies last, 2 to a customer, each item sold separately, batteries not included, mileage may vary, all sales are final, allow 6 weeks for delivery, some items not available, some assembly required, some restrictions may apply. Come on in for a free demonstration and a free consultation with our friendly professional staff. Our experienced and knowledgeable sales representatives will help you make a selection that's just right for you and just right for your budget. And say, don't forget to pick up your free gift, a classic, deluxe, custom, designer, luxury, prestige, high-quality, premium, select, gourmet pocket pencil sharpener. Yours for the asking, no purchase necessary. It's our way of saying thank you. And if you act now, we'll include an extra added free complimentary bonus gift, a classic, deluxe, custom, designer, luxury, prestige, high-quality, premium, select, gourmet, combination keyring, magnifying glass, and garden hose in a genuine imitation leather-style carrying case with authentic vinyl trim. Yours for the asking, no purchase necessary. It's our way of saying thank you.
So we've got this idea of these comedians kind of piercing through, and there's this kind of famous bit of artwork, which leads me on, well, no, not yet. This is the kind of idea, what's kind of known as ecstasis. It's where the term ecstasy comes from. And it means stepping out. So this coming through, this person is here in the lovely world that they know of the trees and the sun and the stars, and then they break through this barrier which is kind of seen, which is ripped, and there's loads of cogs and things moving around, so they've gone from the ordinary world into the place where all the stuff in the universe comes from, supposedly. And it's this idea that when we're having a psychedelic experience, we are stepping out. And I think that comedy kind of runs in this same vein, laughter particularly. You are kind of stepping out of the ordinary experience, possibly going through a kind of transgressive state. There's the idea that, I can't remember who, sort of replacing Freud's notion, and it's this idea that within us we have a child, a parent, and an adult. And in these moments of laughter, you have the child who's laughing, and then you have the adult within him that's kind of like, I'm not sure if I should really be laughing at that. And then the parents, like, I definitely shouldn't have laughed at that. That was a really dark joke. I can't even believe that I laughed at it, but I did laugh at it. So maybe it means it was funny, but it was really dark. And you kind of go through this big stage of like, well, you know, is everything all right to laugh at? If it makes me laugh, does it make it funny? You know, it's after all, it's a biological process that you don't necessarily have much control over. Supposedly there's like all parts of your brain working together when you're laughing. Lots of stuff going on in your frontal lobe. It's a very energetic experience. And I think combined with the psychedelics is an incredibly important part. It makes us step out even further. And it could actually be one of the most healing aspects of the psychedelic experience when we're completely bowled over in this ecstatic state. Now, I got really into Gnosticism, and if you see here, that kind of stepping out state is a very focal point in the Gnostic tradition. Now, here we've got, as everyone can kind of probably tell, the Garden of Eden. The Garden of Eden story I got really fascinated with in the Gnostic texts. And it really flips around this idea of what the kind of traditional ideas of the Garden of Eden are, and really focuses more on this notion of stepping out of ecstasis. So the devil here in Judeo-Christian rhetoric is seen as evil. In the Gnostic text, Satan is seen, or Lucifer is called, as a fallen angel who had a rebellion against what is perceived as an imposter god. So this Garden of Eden here is going to kind of sound a bit similar to all of the weird conspiracy theorists and Anunnaki stuff, and it's probably where they get a lot of it from. So this Garden of Eden is kind of a false Garden of Eden. It's not actually the real world. It's actually a kind of prison. And the god, what's known as a demiurge, is this imposter god who has put people there, made it, you know, nice, all the animals and everything, told them it's paradise, but distinctly given them laws not to eat the fruit of the tree of knowledge. It's never really questioned why. He's just kind of, don't do it, and they're like, okay, right. And they get on with it, and they kind of enjoy the Garden of Eden, and then after a while, this serpent. Now the serpent is quite interesting because the serpent finds its place in lots of different cultures. And I remember going around the Vatican Museum and seeing serpents everywhere. Obviously we've got the serpents on the staff going up that make the health sign for medicine. We've got the serpent in the ayahuasca traditions, which is an incredibly important figure. So that kind of made me really think, like, well, you know, there's something more to this serpent. And in the Gnostic text, the serpent is not this evil being that tempts Adam and Eve to the fruit of the tree of knowledge, but it's seen as a messenger from the spirit world. Now, as we saw in the slide before, it's the world where everything comes from. And the serpent is saying, well, we are from this world, you know, we are from the spirit world. We have this thing in us called pneuma. Might be where the word pneumatic comes from. This idea of spirit within us. And actually we are from, it's kind of similar to Vedic texts in the sense of the Godhead. We're from this kind of spiritual source. And we're actually here on earth as a mistake in this physical realm. It's all a big mistake. This demiurge god has imprisoned us here because he's really insecure and he wants to make laws like don't eat the fruit of the tree of knowledge. And he likes that because it helps him cement his position as the imposter god. To me, it doesn't seem very godlike to make laws and then punish people who disobey the laws. It seems kind of insecure father, not really sure what to do. And so, as everyone knows, Eve ends up eating the fruit of the tree of knowledge. Now, you've got a lot of psychedelic historians who are like, it's definitely a mushroom, 100%, lots of all of the stuff in the Vatican. The guys, they've got the white here and the red here, and it's everywhere, and the mushroom, and it's like, yeah, okay, I mean, maybe, you know, red apples, mushrooms. I don't think it's really important. What I think it is, that fruit of the tree of knowledge is the knowledge part, not the fruit. The knowledge that they are from this spirit world. They are not these physical beings who have to be chained here in the Garden of Eden. I mean, after all, why are they just in a garden? Why are they not in, like, the world of Eden? Like, wouldn't you be a bit annoyed if you were just, you know, like, what, we're the only two people, you're just giving us a garden? It's like, and so they realise that, like, hey, I'm this spiritual being, like you, God, and your stupid laws. And then the whole thing of God punishing them is actually God getting really angry because it's been sussed out. And that's what anyone does when they get sussed out, is be like, no, this is, oh, you've disobeyed me. And then he banishes Adam to whatever place is outside the Garden of Eden that was really horrible. We're not really sure why that existed in the first place. But, and then Eve has pain during childbirth, which is great. Going to reproduce anyways when Adam's been kicked out, but never mind. And so it is really kind of about, again, piercing through this idea, and actually we are kind of spiritual. Anyone know what that is? It is, yeah. It's the map of the observable universe. I'm going to come to that kind of a bit slowly. But this is my final slide. It's just a nice picture. I'm a real kind of space geek at heart. And I tend to kind of have sort of mildly extraterrestrial experiences on psychedelics, thinking about stuff like quantum physics. And the way I kind of also got to laughter personally through psychedelics, I was on quite a strong dose of mushrooms, probably about close to 4 grams of dry liberty caps, on my own, having a really nice time. And I was out in the garden, just kind of thinking away as you do, and I got to this idea of like everything being everywhere and the universe just being everything, which is kind of hard to conceive because it's just like in there in a box, and they're like, oh, that's the universe in there in the box. But it's like, no, it's absolutely everywhere and everything. And I kind of got a bit stumped on that, and I was like, with this everything and everywhere, like, what's the point? Where is it? What's it in? And every time I got to the point of like, well, what's it in? Like, where is the universe? It's like, well, it isn't anywhere, it is everywhere. And I was just like going around in this sort of, not a loop, but like I was getting a bit philosophically stumped and a bit annoyed, and I was like, okay, I need to get past this fucking stupid thought pattern, I don't really know. And then, I don't know if you guys know Will Rowlandson. He, for some reason, popped into my head, and popped into my head as a little water bowl. It was a very visionary experience. You know, some people get the jaguars and the snakes. Like, quintessential. You're on the English Liberty Caps. Did you see the water bowl? And he pops up from the riverbank, and he's like, yeah, don't worry about it, Ollie. It's like, it's really funny. It's like, it's everywhere and everything, and it's all like one big, you know, just like the universe sticking its tongue out at you. Don't worry about it. So I went from kind of being a bit philosophically stumped to like head first in bushes, just absolutely laughing my arse off. Went back inside, dropped to the floor with laughter because it was too much. Just like, couldn't get over this idea that like, that is everything. And like, when we get into stuff like quantum physics and people try and measure stuff, it's like, oh, this thing was here, but it's there and also there at the same time. And it's like the universe again going, aha! I was speaking to my uncle who's a quantum physicist, And he said, yeah, so the latest theory is basically there's only one electron in the entire universe, and it's just shooting out in all these infinite directions. I was like, that's just a fucking piss take, isn't it? There's no other way to see it. It's just like, you can study me. You 2, 3 places at once. And for me, I think that is really what I'm trying to get at. It's like, it's all just kind of a big joke, but not in, I don't say that loosely. I think it can really help us in life. It can help us not be taken by surprise. There's so many things like, I don't know, coincidences or whatever, just like people thinking we live in parallel universes because they've seen one thing and they thought it was something for ages and it turns out to be written like something else. Like there's a golf course near Ramsgate where I live called Stone Lees, but for years it was always stoneless. Every time I saw the sign, stoneless, stoneless, I'm like, oh, it's Stone Lees. And then I'm like, oh, maybe parallel universe kind of thing. But then it's just like, there's all these different things going on that kind of trip us up. And I think it's good when we get tripped up. It's kind of the universe like pinching at us to remind us that it's not all straightforward. And there's loads of stuff we don't know. And we should just enjoy it. And that's really the kind of main purpose of life. I got into all this stuff a while ago when I was having weird hypnotherapy and NLP and getting turned on to people like Eckhart Tolle. I don't know if you guys have heard of Abraham Hicks. Yeah. So Abraham Hicks is really kind of fascinating. It's like, it's very difficult to explain. Abraham Hicks is a collection of not necessarily entities, but it's really like this hypnotherapist. Like, okay, it's really far out stuff, but just like give it a go. It's really, it's really good. So there's these 2 American people, and they sort of channel these entities that are collectively known as Abraham Hicks. And Abraham Hicks wants us humans to know that we should be enjoying life at all moments, every single possible moment in time. The whole reason we're here is, the universe has made all of these different consciousnesses to interact with each other and have a good time, because the universe has sort of been a bit lonely, and that's, kind of keeps it going, is the fact that we're all constantly interacting and having laughter and having joy. And I think it does kind of breed good energy out into the universe when people are laughing. As I said, it's incredibly therapeutic. And yeah, that's kind of it. Thanks.
Ollie, the only thing you're missing off that map is us here. So that's looking out.
Oh yeah.
I thought it was taken all around, but it's not.
Yeah, but all around out, as if you're as if you're at the center of the Earth, but there is no Earth in the way.
Oh, classic.
A little sign saying you are.
Of course we are.
There's a quote by Alan Watts that popped in my head when you were talking. It's quite like. He says the reason the universe is expanding constantly is it's trying to get away from all the scientists who are trying to measure it.
Yeah. There's an episode of Futurama where Dr. Farnsworth gets to the point where he's figured everything out. And he's like, yes! And then he just becomes like absolutely depressed. I think if we got to that point where we're like, yes, we've discovered that inside of the quark, inside of this thing, there's the little guy and he's what would you do?
There's an interesting thing about like what we know and what's to come. Like I see it a bit like a circle where the perimeter is what we're currently researching and the area is what we know. But obviously as we grow, it's going to get wider and wider and wider. So it's like
Sort of
every signature problem creates 10 more problems. Sort of thing.
It's a beast metaphor. Really good.
Maybe we should just stop adding to the knowledge.
Yeah,
Chill out.
Chill
out.
Yes.
Take it away.
So, why do you think humor is so taboo. I mean, okay, it's got a lot of parallels with sex, right? We enjoy it, we constantly engage with it in one way or another. But unlike sex, you walk into a bar and you share humor with your friends, you know, all the time, and it's a constant thing that's in every interpersonal experience. Humor is really at the forefront. So how does it become taboo when it's so prominent? Whereas sex is something that's kept kind of behind closed doors for the most part.
Just to clarify, I think it's taboo within the psychedelic movement.
Okay.
I can kind of call myself the expert on humour and psychedelia because I'm the only person doing it. I think it's because, you know, when we're in school and things like that, and like laughter and being naughty and the whole idea of having to take things seriously, and you know, as I said before, you know, credit where credit's due. The really important stuff that's happening at the moment is, you know, psychotherapeutic research into stuff like PTSD and how these substances can really help people, and all that stuff is very serious and kind of boring, and you've got to, you know, have stuff approved and go through trial after trial after trial and have lots of money to do all these things. But I sometimes kind of worry whether it's like we're taking it all a bit too seriously, and we're all getting wrapped up in the literature surrounding psychedelics, or even just doing psychedelics and not necessarily what's kind of coming after the psychedelics. How do we incorporate things like, you know, the moments where we're absolutely bowled over with laughter because we're on a nice substance. What does that actually mean after the experience has happened? How does it affect your friendships with people? What stuff do you create out of those experiences? Do you share the knowledge? Do you kind of get other people involved? Or...
Have you played with the ideas of important with this?
Pardon?
Important. Like, have you unpacked that concept? Because, I mean, just it's likewise in academia, right? So, as an anthropologist, we have to be solving all the world's problems and all these sort of horrors and, you know, deforestation and cultural loss and blah, 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 and all this sort of stuff. We have to tell everybody how important our research is. And whereas play, I think, is actually extremely important because it makes all this shit bearable.
Yeah, exactly.
And so there's a reason why we have it. But this idea of import needs to, I think, be unpacked, particularly in the psychedelic community.
Definitely.
So have you played with that idea?
I haven't. You know, certainly the discussions are always going around. You know, you've got the people that are really seeing all of this psychotherapeutic stuff and the medical applications as like the way forward with everything, because there has been too many people, you know, in the 60s and 70s just playing, just, you know, taking psychedelics and going to Woodstock and having a nice time and not really doing anything from it. That's the perception, that's not what I'm saying, but and certainly as you mentioned, Karen, like the problems of the world, there's a lot of people that see these substances as the saviour, you know, everything else has failed people, but these medicines, these ancient wisdoms and everything that have been like locked away forever are going to save us. I don't know.
I guess like I would agree with what you say, that it's like probably coming out of defense as well, like a defensive mechanism. I mean, if psychedelics are substances that induce psychedelic experiences, then like a lot of that will be, or can be, very meaningful to the individual. And then going out and saying, let's say, okay, you have like a 6-hour mushroom trip, and like you spend 3 hours just completely laughing your ass off, and then half an hour we're under the tree being like, oh wow, life's beautiful kind of thing. You feel like maybe, you know, that means something to you, and you feel like that is not acknowledged if you portray psychedelics as being fun. So you have to be, oh no, it's actually like, it's healing, like it's not like something you have fun with, it's really important because you want to stress that factor, but in that sense you also undermine the fun part of it.
Yeah. at the beginning, probably most of the people try psychedelics to have a laugh, to enjoy it. So it would be interesting to see how many people use psychedelic as a treatment way or as a moment to share with people, to have a go, to laugh about it.
I mean, the interesting thing, particularly in kind of British culture, certainly with stuff like psychoactive substances, fun is being legislated against. And, you know, I think coming from these kind of very Christian background where we kind of don't show emotions and things like this, and kind of we have to just get on with stuff, and it's like, you know,
Is that Christian though, or is that? Because there are other countries that are more strongly Christian, and they're like core moral. We're just fucked up over here in terms of how we like take that Christianity to another level. I think in terms of when this is, you know what I mean?
Could be religion in general. It doesn't.
I think it has to be like during
Maybe,
the
but-
war and things like that, they had no choice but to go and do what was like needed at the time, so that they just didn't have. It was very hard now.
It's interesting you say that, because when I was doing research into, when I was doing research into sort of historical instances of humour, I was fascinated with things like in Nazi-occupied Norway, joke telling was an incredibly important part. It was the only way that people were able to get on with things. And it became a kind of absolute cornerstone of these people that were living under oppression. And you find that a lot actually in places where countries are really kind of oppressed. Humour is quite strong. And I think we, in the UK, we have certainly a very strong kind of strand of comedy, some of the best comedy in the world. But I think in general our kind of mindset socially, we don't necessarily interact with each other that much. I grew up in London and you couldn't even make eye contact with someone on the tube, let alone sharing a joke with them. It'd be absolutely, they'd think through a management. I don't know if that's to do with kind of whatever, like production and making money, and everyone's just got to get on with it, and there's no time to actually joke around.
Could be the weather.
Could be the weather.
The weather?
The weather was interesting, particularly in English, not any other country in the British Isles. Like England in particular, talking about the weather as a social bonding.
Yeah,
it's the only thing.
It's just depressing. So you're more depressed, you want to enjoy your time, you look into humor, where in other places where you can enjoy somewhere else, you don't really need to go into humor. You can just, have your ups and downs instead of just being at home all the time because of
we
the
do
climate.
leave, alright? Always.
I live here, but in compared with, I don't know, think about like Caribbean countries, for example. Like they probably don't have like humor shows because it's like
that would be an interesting study, vitamin D deficiency, being funny, correlated.
Yeah. Well,
I really like, I don't know if anyone's a fan of Monty Python, but there's just a point where it switches to this army general. Stop that, far too silly. I think that is like an amazing kind of satire on this British stiff upper lip. Like, nope, not really.